can cross your legs, you know, because
you're giving me permission?
Priests in Renaissance times, they were quite worldly.
Of course they were. Well, I've come to confession here with Tom Padula, the director of La Mandragola.
Yes.
And we're behind the scenes here at La Mandragola. As you can see, there's the Madonna here, which is in the scene of the church scene.
Yes.
And
it's actually my home in the play because I'm Frate Timoteo.
that's right. Yes.
And Frate Timoteo is the scheming priest, if you like, the one who's quite worldly, as we said, because at the time, during the time of the Middle Ages, priests, you know, you would go into the priesthood in order to follow your call. Well, that means you had guaranteed.
There were a lot of
food.
perks being in the priesthood.
There always are, because you were the actor, if you like. Well, you had responsibility for the people, and really, priests had to obey 3 rules. One was that of charity, obedience, and what's the third one?
Okay.
Don't you know what the third one is?
No.
They had to be pure.
Pure.
Yes.
But were many of the priests in those times
What
pure?
I'm saying is that they were supposed to be single.
Sure.
So
That was part of their vocation.
single and poor, really. So they had to be poor, they had to obey, and they had to do charity work. They had to look after their flock, the community. So in other words, it was expected that the community would look after them.
In other words, support them with donations and that sort of thing.
And because they lived in the churches, and the churches weren't just little huts. Of course, the churches have always been a very big part of community life. It's a bit like in the past, the church not only had a religious role, but also had a role of education. So there was school, there was teaching in there, there was research in there.
It was also a home for a lot of people.
Welfare, and in fact the church was separate from the state, so the state had no law. The laws of the state did not apply to the church. The church had its own rules and its own laws. Yes.
How did you prepare your role as Frate Timoteo?
Look, Rosario, I must confess, this
Please
role,
confess.
I must confess to you, this role has taken me, I'd say, about 30 years to prepare, because it's taken me a long time to work this one out.
No, you're very convincing, as a frate.
Put on a bit of weight, that's taken a lot of time.
A lot of dedication.
Then you also have to learn your part. Well, that actually taken the least time.
And this was a main role you were in. You had a lot to remember. How did you manage to remember the monologues? Because you had pages and pages of monologues there to remember.
But it wasn't just me. There was also Messernice had to do the same, Liguria had to do the same, and Callimaco had to do the same. And the ladies had minor roles, but they were fairly long too. The key to it in plays is to learn your part. Once you've learned your part, then what you do is, when you think you've learned it, then you spend another 6 months on it. Right. So in other words, in order to become one with the part, it has to come second nature to you. Right. And it's only after you've learned the lines that you are able to then, I think, internalize the situation. So you have to think about the part, what the role of the person, of the personage is, and then you've got to get into it.
And who did you have in mind while you were actually reciting Frate Timoteo?
Frate Timoteo. I thought this is a Frate Timoteo who lived, if you like, at the time of Machiavelli's writings. He was part of the church. He lived in society. He was a bit hypocritical. They were very attached to money because obviously the donations mustn't have been a lot. Because if he was looking for money all the time, that means there was a lot that he could do. But when you think about all the help that the church used to give to the poor, there were no pensions at the time. People were really dependent on the charity of these people, of the priests. So money is never enough when you're trying to look after the whole of the population.
Which is usually the role that the priest has in small communities. He's the one who tries to...
That role now has become more and more, it's gone away from the ecclesiastical. They still have that role, but now the state has been made to bear the brunt of its responsibility towards the whole of the population. And some parties do a better job in their philosophies than others. Some parties, for example, they go into government thinking we just have to look after the infrastructure. We don't have to look after everyone, they can look after themselves.
Whereas the priests try to look after the families, the family unit, yes?
Yes, but also some philosophies in political circles also have the same aims, to look after everyone. And it's not always possible because, you know, when you've got a small cake and there are a lot of people there, even if you give them a little bit of each, it's not enough.
Son 20 anni che vivo lontano, ma il mio cuore rimane toscano. Stanotte ho sognato Firenze, la luna splendeva sull'Arno, le coppie intrecciavano danze. Tra il profumo dei fiori mi appare sul balcone di casa, adorno di glicini e rose, e un trepido cuore di sposa fremeva aspettando l'amore, poi solo di pianto e dolore è stato il risveglio per me. Il vuoto, l'eterno squallore, d'intorno ho sentito perché. Io voglio tornare a Firenze, non posso più stare lontano, il mio cuore rimane toscano, oh mia bella città.
This program proudly sponsored by Insegna International Languages Bookshop.